This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Quiet on the set. Soon we will all be more informed.
We appreciate learning more of our region's news and public affairs. Cameras rolling.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. When Ray Nagin first ran for mayor, there were high hopes for a candidate who boasted that he wasn't a politician, but a businessman. Well, this week, when Nagin happily announced that he was no longer under the federal jurisdiction that had originally sent him to prison, we were reminded that sometimes political influence and business don't mix. Politics will be in the news this week with the state's presidential primary and special elections, including a tense contest for St. Tammany-Washington Parish DA. Still to be decided is the fate of a coroner-elect who some St. Tammany officials are asking to resign even before he gets in office. And we will take a special look at the career of a meteorologist who's not seeking office, but retiring instead. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Margaret Orr, Chief Meteorologist, WDSU-TV Channel 6, Sarah Pagones, retired North Shore Bureau Chief, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, and Gordon Russell, Managing Editor of Investigations, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. And before we get into our discussion, I just want to remind everybody, just in case I forget later on, to stay tuned after Informed Sources this evening because we will run our 40th anniversary special. So that's coming up at 7:30 and then it'll be repeated again Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Okay, to jump into this conversation for something that we've covered a lot of over the past 40 years, that's elections.
Yeah, well tomorrow, the presidential primary, they've been having these all over the country. You can feel the excitement out there, can't you, out there about this? About this. When our forefathers created the form of government, I think they overall did a good job, and they created the presidency and the Supreme Court and the legislature. With the presidency, they created the electoral college system because when we elect a president, we're really not a national election. We're 50 state elections at the same time, and then they kind of total them all up one day. And so the idea was to have electors from each state be elected, and then they go and Washington on this given day, and then they vote. Well, what they didn't quite figure out is how you elect the electors who become the ones who go to Washington. And at the beginning, it was really like the state legislature, decided to elect us. We all want Thomas Jefferson, send him over there. Or sometimes in Louisiana, there was a time when the governor, when Louisiana was all Democratic party. I remember John McKinnon says, okay, here are the delegates that are going. And so, but over the years, people said, hey, what about some democracy here? What about voting? And so they created different systems of people being able to vote on who the electors should be. Some did the caucus system, like in Iowa. Some did some kind of election system, but ultimately, elections are what you want. But the problem is that you elect a slate of electors, but it's hard for people to campaign for elections, and they don't even know who they are in most cases. But you're really voting tomorrow for the electors. So if you're voting for Trump or if you're voting for Biden, in a sense, you're voting for those people who are pledged to go to the party convention and vote for them. Now, who are those people? We don't know, okay, because they used to list them all on the ballot, but then you're getting these big, bulky ballots, and so now they just don't even list them on the ballot. And so you can see Trump's name, and you're going to see Biden's name, and you can see a bunch of minor candidates. Like, I don't want to offend anybody, but there's Rachel Hannah Mohawk Swift, who's running one thing, and Cenk Unger, who's running somewhere else. So you can see those names, too. But essentially, that's what you're voting for tomorrow, and that's what's going to be calculated. And of course, it's all been decided already a few weeks ago when enough electors were elected in the other states that we know when we go to the convention. So this has changed conventions. Conventions used to be this kind of fun thing when you had the roll call and people were cajoling each other and doing this sort of thing. Now they're becoming more of media kind of events, a lot of films and things that The drawback is nobody watches them anymore because they're just like a big PR show. It's not the kind of conventions that like they used to be.
Okay, but still important to go, vote tomorrow. And there are a bunch of other elections all around the community too.
Yeah, well, they're not that important. I got to say because it's all been decided. But you need to be aware of what you're doing. But also on the ballot are some minor party offices and some municipal elections. And in the case of like St. Tammany, where there's a vacancy to be filled,
what you're going to talk about, yeah, right.
There's those kind of elections.
Yeah, but always, if you can, it's just important to go vote. You have the opportunity to vote for something, exercise your right. Okay, E, thanks. Let's go over to you, Sarah, because there is tension in St. Tammany and excitement about this race for district attorney. I mean, it's a hotly contested race.
Yeah, it's been pretty spicy, I guess you'd say. I asked a couple people who have knowledge about political things how they would rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 for maybe being ugly or dirty, and they said not dirty so much, but definitely lots of negative campaigning. So we are seeing that. This is for the unexpired term of Warren Montgomery, who died last November, was very popular, had come in as a reformer after Walter Reed. It's an ignominious end to his career. And so now we have a real election because the person who's running this time, Vincent Wynn, challenged Warren last time and lost pretty handily to Warren. And now it's him again against the person who'd kind of been the right-hand man of Warren in the office at head of criminal investigation, prosecutions, and also his assistant.
So this fills the term of Warren Montgomery's second term.
His second
so how
term.
many years will this individual, whomever is selected, have?
Well, whoever gets elected, it'll be till 2026.
Okay.
Yeah, so about halfway through.
About a parish like St. Tammany is that there are so many incorporated cities, and they all have their own police chiefs, and they all have their own spokesmen. And so this is kind of a battle for like in New Orleans, we only got one police chief.
That's true.
Right? Okay, but you got a whole bunch of them there, and it's kind of a battle to get those people to endorse you.
Yeah, that's true. You have 3 of the police chiefs from the larger municipalities saying they're for Colin, and you have the sheriff's office saying that they're all for Vincent Wynn.
And so a little bit of background on each of these candidates.
Well, Colin was a former U.S. attorney. He's worked as, like I said, the head of criminal prosecutions. They're both St. Tammany people. They have deep roots in the community. Vincent Wynn worked for Walter Reed as misdemeanors and tickets, and then he's had a pretty thriving private practice as a criminal defense attorney.
And he's really been attacked by this. For
He
his
has.
defense
And the
attorney
irony
work.
of that to me is that Warren was attacked for the same thing when he ran the first time. Oh, he's a criminal defense attorney, so he's putting bad people back on the street. That we have a system where you have people that prosecute, and then we have a right to a defense. But it's also being fought a lot, I think, over qualifications. And Colin saying he's a more qualified person, and Vincent Wynn saying I run a business, I run my own private practice. There's a lot more to the DA's office than just trials.
And also the DA over there in St. Tammany. How often do we see the DA in there presenting a case, arguing a case?
I don't think I have ever seen the district attorney actually as the prosecutor. Now, I have seen Colin because he was the head of criminal prosecutions. He prosecuted Jack Strain, the sheriff who went to jail for life for sexual crimes. But for the most part, it's really not a job as a person who prosecutes. It's a job running the office.
So it's really a management job.
Yes,
essentially.
I'd say so.
I think so. I mean, I would say there was a long tradition in Louisiana, maybe not our proudest tradition, of district attorneys who didn't show up to work that often. And I'm not going to name names, but it was kind of a caretaker position in a lot of places. And you've seen some change in that. I think Colin was, when he was first assistant, he was in the courtroom. And actually, Jason Williams in New Orleans, he gets criticized for all kinds of things, but he's known as a pretty good courtroom lawyer, and he's personally prosecuted a lot of cases, which is pretty unusual for a big city DA.
He was a defense attorney
recently. Yes.
Yeah. But he was Jason Williams was a defense attorney.
He was a
really
defense
well-known
attorney. Yeah,
defense
so
attorney.
he's known as a skilled guy in the courtroom, and he's continued to do that as DA.
So the feeling over there, Sarah, you live over there on the North Shore, and you're talking to your friends. I mean, what's the feeling? Is this going to be a blowout, or is it going to be a tight race?
I think it's going to be a tight race. That's what I'm hearing from folks. It's not going to be a walk away. I mean, Warren absolutely trounced Vincent last time. It's not going to be like that. But I still think perhaps Colin has a little bit of an edge on Vincent Wynn. It's kind of shaping up as a sort of a referendum on Walter Reed, ironically, who's, I guess, probably sitting in his home watching this with some amusement because, everybody wants to tie their opponent to him. It's really not about Walter. It's about who's best to carry it forward.
Right. And turnout, what's the feeling over
Oh,
there?
I don't know, but I would assume it's going to be low.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Yeah.
I would think they'd
even-
be out there voting. No?
Well, It hasn't been high lately in Tammany, surprisingly, and there's not a lot of other things on the ballot. If there was a tax they could vote against, you could be sure they'll turn out for that.
Okay, we shall see. All right, Sarah, thanks a lot. Gordon, over to you. Former Mayor of New Orleans, Ray Nagin, tweeted out, or he sent the message via X, this past weekend, free at last.
Yep, he's completed his federal probation after, so it was about 10 years ago that Ray Nagin was sentenced to a decade in prison, which was for various corruption-related crimes. And that was, the 10 years was actually a substantial downward departure by the judge. But it was still a pretty long sentence. And then he caught a little bit of a break when, during the pandemic, he was allowed to go home early. So he served, now I have to do the math in my head, but he served about 5 years behind bars, I think.
Behind bars. I mean, one night behind bars could seem like an eternity. Where was he during that time?
He was at a prison camp in Texarkana, which is not too far from where his family relocated in the Dallas area. They had bought a townhouse there after Katrina, and they just stayed there after he left office. And, I think it was not a particularly pleasant time for him to be in New Orleans with all the controversy around him, and they've just remained there. So after getting out of prison, he was on house arrest for a couple of years in the Dallas area, and then he was on probation for a couple of years, and as of last weekend, that's all over.
And when he was allowed to go early, it wasn't just him, it was all
a lot of people
of a certain age because of COVID.
I don't know if it was quite a broad brush, but they were directed to let people out who were nonviolent offenders, who had good discipline records, who were, the older they were, there were all kinds of considerations. And of course, he was no danger to society, and so he was an ideal candidate for that.
And what landed him in jail? Prison?
Well, essentially taking bribes, but it was complicated. But he had started this granite countertop business with his sons, and he received some bribes from a contractor who's doing business with the city, who invested in the granite company in exchange for getting contracts with the city. And there was another sort of scheme with a businessman named Frank Fradella, who was in all kinds of other trouble, and he was also he paid Ray a lot of money after he left office, and that was kind of he was angling for a big deal from the city, which I don't think he ever really got, and I think that was actually a weakness in the government's case. But Ray did take the money that the government was able to persuade a jury he shouldn't have taken. So those are the main pillars of the case. There were a few other things too.
He still maintains his innocence.
He does, yeah. And and a jury disagreed, obviously, found him guilty on 20 of 21 counts. I mean, I still think that, had he had better legal representation, things could have gone a little differently. I mean, there was a better case to be made for his innocence than I saw made.
So now,
or maybe not innocence, but acquittal anyway.
He's now seeking to have some rights restored.
Yes, he's representing himself, and he has filed to have, he'd like a passport, he'd like to be able to vote, and he would like to be able to carry a gun. He says that people still recognize him all the time in Dallas, and that makes him nervous about his safety and his family's safety.
People know he lives in Texas now, his family's in Texas. And he was living in Texas actually before he went to prison. I mean,
That's right. He actually bought this townhouse in Frisco outside of Dallas right after Katrina, where his family would sometimes go, and I think his wife spent a lot of time there during his second term. And then after he finished in 2010, it was 4 years between his end of his time in City Hall and when he was convicted. That's where they lived. Mm-hmm. Now, he actually has moved since then to another townhouse, but nearby. It's in Dallas proper. It's sort of in the Southern Methodist University area.
Now, he's off probation, he served the time, but he still owes money.
Yeah, he still owes, I want to say, about $40,000. He's paying back the money. $1,200 a month.
That's back taxes?
It's money that was determined that he owed the IRS because of tax evasion and other things. And he's got two fairly substantial pensions between Cox Cable and his city pension, ironically. And so he gets about $10,000 a month from those, and so he's $1,200 of that he has to send to the federal government.
And Gordon, remember when he first ran, all the excitement he caused? Yeah. He was a new figure,
yes,
young, handsome.
Much of it in my newspaper.
Yeah, the guy
he had the walk.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
remember
walk?
that was what we
Yeah,
liked.
yeah.
Yeah.
That fast walking commercial.
He had a job and had he not run for mayor, he could have had a great life. He had this great job.
It's a thought experiment I've run 1,000 times because I think he was making something like $400,000 a year, and it was a pretty easy job. I mean, his job was kind of to lobby the city council. I think he had a big expense account. He had it made kind of, and I think he actually ran for the right reasons. I don't think he ran because he wanted to get into graft and corruption. I mean, I think that stuff happened sort of ironically because he took a big pay cut by, and this is not to justify it, but he went from making $400,000 a year to about $150,000 a year, and I think he was
Struggling.
he was feeling like he didn't have enough money to live in the style that he was accustomed to, I think, and that was where some of the problems came in.
And bankruptcy was filed at one point.
Yeah, that was right after his conviction, and his wife filed for bankruptcy, and that was their home in Texas was up for foreclosure, and she said she was on food stamps at the time. I think she was working a retail job, but I think their fortunes have improved since then.
Well, definitely a difficult time for the city, and certainly for Ray Nagin and his family, with what transpired.
Yeah.
And the series of events. Okay, so when will he find out about? Can he get his passport back?
I don't know that there's a deadline, but I mean, he's filed the motion, and it's going to be up to a federal judge, Jane Trish Malazzo, to decide that.
All righty. Okay, thanks a lot, Gordon. All right, Meg. All right. Congratulations to you. It's wonderful having you here at this table. I've known you for a long time, since the 70s. We were in the newsroom together at WDSU.
Yes.
So, gosh, what a career it's been. What are your feelings now?
I am sad, and I'm so excited. And I go back and forth, sad, excited. It's really a double-edged sword. You know, I love my job. I love working at WDSU. It has truly opened doors for me. I got to do the Children's Hospital telethon. I get to dance in the streets.
And we've seen you
Fat
dance. You do it
Tuesday
well.
with my pink wig on as the Queen of Cotton Candy. And I've gotten to be there during really difficult times for our people. And I consider the people of New Orleans, Southeast Louisiana, South Mississippi, my family. You know, my family lives here. So I care about everybody here.
And, I think people at home also, would think, does she ever go home? You're there all the time, for and, God knows we have a series of weather events to cover here in this area. And you are covering it. You're there all the time.
I am there all the time. So when I did the breakfast edition, I was up at 1, at work at 2 a.m., worked until 1 or 2 p.m. Now I go into work by 12 or 12:30, and I'm often there until 11. If the weather is bad, well, then I'm there until 1 or 1:30 until the next person is there and ready to go. It is a 24/7 job, especially with social media. So the first thing I do in the morning, I let Blue out, take video of Blue, my beautiful, wonderful puppy who's 15 years old, a rescue border collie. And I take video of him in the garden, and then I am posting the weather forecast for that day and into the week. So I am going to continue to do that on X, which I still call Twitter, Thread, Instagram, Facebook. I'm not on TikTok because of China. Just saying. I never did do that. But it is a demanding job. People think, oh, you go on the air at 5 o'clock, so what do? Get there at 4?
You have to prepare for all of that.
You have to prepare. You have radio to do. You have meetings to do. And it's a demanding job. Now, if it is severe weather, as we are getting more and more severe weather, you're just there. I can remember one day, it was when we started the weather alert days. It was March 22nd, 2022, the anniversary of today. We had the Arabi tornado. And we were on the air every hour, just giving people updates because we really felt that we were going to get severe weather. So at 7 o'clock, I went on the air to do an update, and we had the tornado. It came shortly thereafter. So I was actually on the air investigating the storm that looked severe, that looked like it had rotation, and then we had confirmation in our cameras of a tornado, an actual tornado on the ground, and I looked at it and said, this looks like an EF3.
An actual tornado. I think so many of us were stunned to see a tornado of that strength and size in our area.
Exactly. So we are getting more severe weather. The first severe tornado that came through the city, I was on the air then too, was in the morning, came through at 2:55. So this one started on the West Bank, crossed the river into the Carrollton neighborhood. Damon Singleton lived there. His home was partially damaged, and he said he had seconds to grab his kids and go under the bed. That's why we always say, know where your safe spot is and tell your kids to go there without you, if need be.
And pay attention. I mean, now you all can really tell us block to block almost. You know, it's coming your way, and so you have time to prepare. So it's important to pay attention.
We
Absolutely.
actually go block by block. Because of dual pole radar, we can see debris in the air. We actually saw that with the New Orleans East tornado, which was February 7th, 2017. That was a day where I got up, looked at the radar, saw 3 separate, isolated, strong, severe storms. I called the newsroom and said, get ready. We are going to have a severe outbreak today.
So as you
and we did.
It's a 24/7 job. It has been a 24/7 job for you.
Yes.
What are you going to do now?
I'm going to play with my grandchildren. I'm going to turn on the sprinkler and let them run through it, and I'm going to run with them. I've been in the garden today. That's why my hair is up. My hair does this, and it did this, and I went, the heck with it. It's going up. And,
You look lovely.
you know, I'm going to weed my garden. I'm going to write some books. I'm going to teach myself how to paint again because I never can do it continuously. I have to reteach myself. And I'm going to go on a couple of trips. My first one is to see the solar eclipse in Frisco. Ray Nagin has moved, so he's not there anymore, but I have best friends there. And I'm doing a family reunion in June, and my son is doing a half. He makes it clear, Mom, it's not a full, a half Iron triathlon.
That's a lot of work.
So that's Panama City, and I'm going to go and watch him.
Well, Meg, we wish you just nothing but happiness. I know that we're going to continue to see you, though. I can't imagine that you're just going to only give yourself to your family. You're still going to let us have you a little bit, too. Huh?
Absolutely, and I'm still posting on social media every day.
And we'll be looking for that.
Thank
Gosh,
you.
Meg, that's hard to say. That you're retiring, you know, I just remember those days, all these decades
young.
ago when
we were young.
We were very young.
We were
yes.
very young, and I
in the
always
newsroom in the
admired
70s.
you.
Oh, thanks,
Always
Meg.
admired you.
Well, the community has loved you, and thank you for everything that you've given to the community. Literally, you have saved lives. You
And I'm
have.
thankful that I have been there to be able to do that.
Well, have fun.
I
Have
am.
fun. Okay. All right, Sarah, over to you. We're going to wrap up with you because over in St. Tammany, I mean, it's always happening over there now in St. Tammany, the coroner's office, and there's a real big controversy about that.
And that, you know, the coroner years ago went to prison for corruption, and then a new guy came in, Charles Preston. He was a reform guy. He decided not to run for re-election this last August, I guess it was, and somebody ran named Christopher Tape. He was a forensic pathologist, and he doesn't start work actually until Monday. But in the last few months or so, I guess, it's come to light that he had some sexual charges against him. And now there's people calling for him to resign. And he doesn't seem to be inclined to do that. And in fact, today, he decided or announced that he's going to be discontinuing the sexual assault nurse examiners program, which I think a lot of people had talked about. You know, how can somebody with this past in their past, you know, be in charge of an office that has this program? Well, doesn't have it anymore.
So he's decided against that. So,
Yep.
I mean, we're just hearing about that
Yeah,
too,
it just
so we really
happened
don't know
today.
the community response yet.
Yeah.
But you know, what charges were there against him?
There were some charges.
What I wanted to point out, he was not convicted.
No, he was not. He did not. The charges were ultimately dropped because they didn't bring him to trial timely, and that was in New Mexico, I believe.
Yep.
And it was some counts of basically he was charged with spanking his girlfriend's 7-year-old daughter on her bare behind and then rubbing it. So that's the charge. And then there was an employee of his that brought some charges of unwanted sexual advances, but I don't believe that was criminal.
That was a civil thing. Yeah, but
civil
the first thing he was sort of accused of. He was doing this for sexual gratification, and
He was accused of that, yeah.
Yeah, and David Hammer, who reported that story first, talked to the woman who was a child at the time and her mother, who felt pretty strongly that this was not okay what he was doing.
And of course, he says that she had sort of given the okay for him to discipline the child.
Yeah.
All right, but the bottom line is he's going to be taking the office this Monday. He's been asked to step down, and he's not doing it.
He doesn't seem to be inclined to do that. He hasn't, from what I heard from my former colleagues, he has not answered any calls. So he has been kind of keeping a low profile. But come Monday, he'll be the coroner.
Okay, we'll see what happens. All right, guys, other stories. E, over to you.
Well, yesterday, Mayor Cantrell proclaimed the great day in New Orleans history. And what she was referring to was that there was a land swap between the council and the state. It's pretty complicated, but essentially land around Duncan Plaza the city gets, and the state gets land around Superdome. And this seems, though, like a first serious step towards ultimately resolving the new City Hall thing. It seems like the momentum now is in that direction of where Duncan Plaza is. That's what I think was the reason behind the land swap. So I think we finally resolved where we're going with this.
Okay.
And the other big thing is that these azaleas are blooming. All of them beautiful.
Oh, they've just been gorgeous. I know they have. Meg.
Peggy Martins are blooming too. Oh my gosh, they are stunning. That was the rose that survived Katrina.
Right.
So it does look like it's going to be an active hurricane season. What we have is a La Nina that's going to develop. That means no strong upper level winds to disrupt tropical systems. Plus, we have above normal water temperatures in the Atlantic and in the Gulf. Because La Nina will develop probably a little late, I would expect a very active season September into October that could linger into November. Averages 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, 3 major.
Oh.
Well, last year, we got a bye.
Yeah, well, yeah.
High pressure aloft gave us.
Yeah, we were hot, but we
Very
didn't have a
hot
storm. All right, Meg, thanks. Over to you. Sarah?
Oh, well, the other thing that's going on is that we had a parish councilman bring a weapon into the chambers at the last meeting. He was carrying it around in a duffel bag. He's a guy who ran sort of on a let's keep the dirty books out of the library, kind of a culture warfare platform. Doesn't like the First Amendment as much as the Second. And maybe he's going to ask for them to challenge another book like Farewell to Arms. I don't know.
All right, we'll see. Gordon, real quick.
We're going to be watching, there's been a motion to vacate the chair of House Speaker Mike Johnson. You'll recall that the last House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, was dumped by a coup from his own party. Something like that may be underway again, although it's not clear how serious this is.
All righty, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for watching. Remember, 40th anniversary show following this. And we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Public television is our passion. With so much content that WYES broadcasts and presents online, we are quite entertained and highly informed.
Please join us in supporting WYES.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.